which is tell us a critique group horror story and a success story. So I'll tell a horror story first. I primarily write speculative fiction with very few exceptions. I write a little bit of memoir, but for the most part, I'm writing solidly in the sci-fi fantasy space, and I often write for children. So one of the first writing groups that I mentioned that I joined when I moved here to Washington in late 2014 was with some old friends of mine. And the first time I showed up, they were like, "Oh, I don't know if this is going to work. We write literary." And I was so horrified because I also write literary. I just happen to write literary fantasy. So I was trying to like tamp down my worries and also my hurt feelings over being told that I could not be literary because I was writing kidlit and writing in the fantasy space. And although those people are still friends of mine, we did not ultimately work out as the critique partner relationship. And so that is definitely, it was an awkward situation to navigate. I was new to the area and I wanted to keep these new friends that I was making, but at the same time, clearly our thoughts were about writing were not aligned. They often felt that they couldn't critique what I was writing because they didn't know the market or weren't familiar with fantasy and that type of thing. And so while I do think that finding people that are writing similar genre and age category to you can be helpful, I also have critique partners who write adult, who write contemporary, who write historical, who write romance. And I don't think that that's as big a deal as sometimes people make it out to be. So even though that particular group didn't work out, right around the same time that I moved here, I attended Write On Con, which is an online writing conference, and that is actually where I met Jessica and Gabby and Gita. So that was a really fun thing. We were critiquing each other in a forum, and I kind of said, "Hey, I like your writing. Are you looking for critique partners?" And people were, and the rest is history. Now our little group has put out so many books and been on so many adventures together, and it's really been fun. So that's my horror story and my success story. Does anybody else have something they want to share?
For me, I think my horror story, I actually had to rack my brain about this. I don't know if I just have mental blocks. I know there have been I've had some bad matches with critique partners, but I think on reflection, it's mostly been about either not being sort of at the same level in terms of how focused we are on our goals. So I've had critique partners who just want to improve their writing, and I've had critique partners who have a goal to get published. And since my goal at the time was to get published, that really helped us sort of be on the same page about the levels of critique that we wanted to do. But I think the hardest thing is having somebody who pushes back against your critique or who wants to kind of argue about it. And what I've learned over the years is just that, when somebody's giving you critique, you're trusting them, but they're also trusting you with their thoughts and opinions about your work. And so even though sometimes that can be hard to hear, it's even worse when somebody sort of fights you on it and wants to make it harder, I guess. Ends up making it harder. So that's my horror story. My success story is just, my very first critique partner I met at a conference at Pacific Northwest Writers Association conference in Seattle. And I just thought she looked cool. So I went over and I said, hi. We were both in the same seminar and we started talking, and she offered to read for me. And I was such a newbie. I had no idea what critique partners were. I was unaware that people could actually pitch to agents and that was a whole thing. I was really coming in green. And she taught me so much. Her name's Lynn Schmidt, and she writes poetry. She has some published poetry books out now that she's fantastic. So check her out. But yeah, so that's my success story. And it was, luck and reaching out.
you're just starting out, to find critique partners as early as you can, and to find critique partners that are sort of in the same place you are. It goes to what Gita was saying earlier, just wanting to be able to support each other in a way that you're both getting something out of the relationship, but also you grow together. There's something really valuable in that. And now that I'm further along and sort of know what I need, I actually have a sort of set of critique partners that meet once a month, and we just trade pages as we're writing. So I send them fresh pages, because to me, getting early feedback is really valuable, so that I don't spend too much time developing writing that maybe isn't the right scene or doesn't have the right characters. And then I also have a set of weekly, we call each other critique partners, but we're really more like beta readers. But every single week we get together and we brainstorm ideas and what we're working on. So we're constantly getting ongoing feedback. And I don't know, I'm of the camp that the more feedback you get, the better, but I know some people that really overwhelms them. So it just depends on what kind of writer you are. And I think where you are in your writing career and what you need. Sometimes early on, you need really detailed feedback so that you can really fine tune your writing voice and your style. And then maybe as you become more proficient at that, you need more big picture feedback about, do you have the right character arc? Do you have the right plot? Do you have the right themes in your story?
And I think there are CP groups that are just, really purely support groups too. Like, I know there are some authors that I'm friends with that are, published, and they're really much more about like, I need support, and I need to know that like I'm on the right track here and you're on my side, and that's really what they use their CPs for. It just kind of depends on what you need and when you need it. And the best way to figure that out is to jump in, like Jessica is saying, and just recognize that those relationships will evolve and shift and change, and you'll meet more people. And, sometimes a CP will work for one book and not so much for another. And you learn that through working with them and kind of getting a handle on their style and what kind of feedback they give.
Yeah, absolutely. And I definitely have brought critique partners in as early as the concept stage. I do a long form synopsis that's a high level description of everything that I know about the story, which often is only 2 to 3 pages when I'm first starting an idea. And I'm pretty sure everyone on this call has gotten one of those from me, and responded back with poking a few holes, suggesting a few comp titles to look into, asking a few questions, just that like very preliminary level feedback. But I wouldn't do that with just anyone. I would do that with people that I trust. I know that my critique partners aren't going to come back and say, well, that's a stupid idea. Why would you do that? They might say, have you thought about this? So, I mean, that sort of diplomacy and support is really important part of the process, because we all write things that don't work. Like even the best writers I know write things sometimes that don't work, and having people that you can trust to point you in the right direction when you're in one of those spaces is really good. But also to Jessica's point, I think, Jessica, you really trust your authorial voice, and so it's easy for you to bring people in early in the process and ask for that kind of feedback. But if you're still not sure and not confident in your writing, that kind of feedback can be devastating. So knowing your own writing process and what is going to work for you is important as well. I was going to say, I think the pace of writing is really important too, because it can be really frustrating if for example, I write about a novel length manuscript per year. I've been pretty consistent with that for almost the last 10 years. So I think I can say that I'm going to stick to that pace. And if you're somebody who works on a book for 10 years, you're probably going to get annoyed because I'm going to ask you to read a book 10 times over that 10-year period, and you're going to just still have the one. But at the same time, I mean, I have friends who are indie publishing who are putting out 4 books a year, and they're annoyed with my pace because it's so slow compared to what they're doing. And they're needing different kinds of feedback for that pace versus the 1 book a year pace versus the 1 book every 10 years pace. So I think that the pace of your writing can be a really important question to ask as well.
I ultimately think at the very beginning that's probably the most important thing, because you definitely want to know, does this person want to, well, do they want to meet virtually or in person? How many pages do they want to trade and how often? And if you are on the same page with that, then the other big thing really is just to acknowledge that this is a trial. And for 100 million different reasons, it might work out and it might not. And so if you say, let's meet once, and then afterward, if it really didn't feel very good to you, you can say, you know, here's what I liked about it. Thank you. However, I don't feel like this is right for me. And is it awkward? And is that kind of hard to do? Yes, but it's better than continuing to meet and being frustrated until that relationship dissolves. And ultimately, I think the best way to know if you're on the same page with somebody is just to go ahead and give it a shot and do that trial.
And know that they're doing the same thing, right? And that's the understanding you come to the meeting with or whatever. And I think with that framework ahead of time, people can sort of buffer their feelings a little bit and feel okay about it.
And then you really just have to go with your gut and figure out the way to address it. Something, they're indicating that something's wrong, right? But you don't necessarily know what it is. And there is always a little bit of subjectivity in all of this. Some people really, really love a book, and other people respond to it with that one, that's too slow, or there wasn't enough character development, or I couldn't suspend my disbelief. And that's why there's all different kinds of books and all different kinds of writers, right? So
I think too, it's important to talk about, I mentioned other people and how they interact in the group, but it's also to think about what type of group member you want to be, because there's something that we all call feedback arguers, and we've all alluded to this a little bit. But if you're the type of person who just doesn't take feedback well and constantly pushes back and wants to argue with what people are telling you, then there probably is not going to be a good long-term fit, because that's not really enjoyable. It's not part of that give and take that Julie was talking about earlier. And so try to be really conscious about what you bring to the group. And if you're finding that feedback isn't resonating, or you're wanting to be defensive, take a look at whether that's because you're insecure in your own writing, or it's just not a good match in terms of trusting the other person, and really be conscious about how you show up.
I use a lot of phrases like, I'll have to think about that. And that's interesting. I hadn't thought of it that way before, because a lot of times my first response to feedback that's unexpected is like, well, that can't be right. Surely I didn't put that plot hole in there. I'm smarter than that. I've been writing forever. And then when I go back and think about it, I'm like, oh, now I see what they were talking about. So I think that flexibility, sometimes it's good to just say, ah, that's interesting. You can be non-committal, because I bet when you go back and read over the notes a second time, you'll find a gem that you can use. Yeah. So somebody's asking, where else can I connect with critique partners? And I know this is particularly true as things are still slowly coming back to in-person because of COVID.
I think Twitter is a really valuable tool at this point. It's such an active online writing community, and I don't know all the hashtags. Is it MG Wave, or there's a group that now pretty regularly connects people in a way similar to what Julie's doing now. But if you get on Twitter and get involved in the writing community, you'll find pretty quickly that there's lots of people looking for critique partners, and you can just do trial and error until you find your people.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, I think there's a lot of conversation on the MG book chat Twitter that could easily lead to critique partner relationships. If you find that you like some similar books to somebody who's tweeting, you can start to talk back and forth with them, and then just maybe once you get to know them a little bit, ask, hey, are you looking for critique partners? And somebody mentioned in the chat MG Hub. Yeah, and I think there are like just the writing community hashtag often has things like that in it. The different online pitch programs often have practice days too. Like there'll be a DV pitch contest, and then the week before there'll be a practice session, and you can find other people and be like, hey, I really like your pitch. I mean, really what you're looking for is people whose ideas you like and find interesting, right? Because you're going to invest time and energy in getting to know them and their work. So So pick people whose writing you like, whose personality you like, and then it's going to be a joy to come to critique group with them or meet them for coffee, or maybe just meet them on Zoom from time to time.